Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. So today we're going to start by talking about one of the questions that we get asked a lot when we talk about our John Muir Trail experience. And that question is, why would you hike the John Muir Trail? What made you do it?
Yeah, it's so funny because people say, like, why did you choose that trail? And how did you learn about it? And it seems like the more you hike and backpack, the more you hear about certain trails, like the Appalachian Trail, Continental Divide Trail, PCT,
Wonderland Trail,
Arizona Trail, etc. The John Muir Trail is in that mixture. And so what we'd done was quite a few trips, but had never broke 100 miles. And we were looking for, like, what's that next distance that's not necessarily the PCT over 2,000 miles, but what could we do to just get a little bit more mile on the trail? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why we chose the John Muir Trail. But then it also turns out that the scenery is amazing as well.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, too, one of the things that I was thinking about was I wanted to know, am I a person who can just keep going for days and days on the trail? Because there's something about when you first start backpacking for like a one-night backpack, of course you can do anything for one night. And then it's not that hard to extend it to 2 or 3 or even up to 5. I mean, sometimes that gets a little bit intimidating, but after a certain point, you kind of go, could I last for 14 days on trail? Could I last for 15 days on trail? I don't know. And so it was one of those things where I also kind of wanted to test myself and see what it was like.
And I even think about, like, the first time I did a 5-mile trip, it's like after 2 days, you're already at the halfway point, and so you know, like, the end is near.
5 miles.
Oh, did I say 5 miles? 5-day trip?
Okay, I was like, wow. I was like, she even remembers her first 5-mile trip.
Gosh.
I don't even know what mine was.
Yeah, really. A 5-day trip. Okay. After, like, 2 days, right, you're like, okay, I'm at the halfway point, and I'm fine. And that was such a different experience. We were planning to do the John Muir Trail in 18 days.
I think so.
And we ended up doing it in basically 14.
Yeah.
And so, like, the second day being like, oh, I'm on day 2, but I am, like, so far from the halfway point. And I think it even is just a way to train your perspective in life, where instead of, like, always reaching and striving towards the end goal, it's so corny, like, it's about the journey, quote unquote, but it really is. And it's learning, like, today is another day. My main focus today is going to be walking, making sure that I'm safe, making sure I'm hydrated, have proper nutrition, and enjoy my surroundings. Mm-hmm. But I'm not even going to be thinking about Mount Whitney, because that's literally 2 weeks away. And if I focus too much on that, then I'm going to have a horrible, miserable time right now. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, Carrie and I would both say that the mental aspect of hiking is maybe one of our favorite things. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about resilience when we're on the trail, and it's developing, once again, just that ability to focus on your current needs and not let it get out of control by thinking about the big picture too much.
And so as far as the John Muir Trail goes, we thought we'd just kind of recap what it is, just for anybody who's not aware.
So if you are not aware of it, once again, it's in the Sierra
Nevada.
Yep, that's the one. Sierra Nevada. The John Muir Trail is 211 miles long. It goes through 3 national parks. It starts in Yosemite National Park, and once again, the terminus is Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the lower 48. Mm-hmm. So the John Muir Trail, my personal thought is the most beautiful part about it is the expansiveness of the trail. Mm-hmm. You go through 11 different mountain passes, 10, and they're over, 6 of them are over 11,000 feet. So you get a lot of high altitude scenery. And it's not like you're in the forest a lot. You get to see a lot of just open, expansive terrain. And sometimes if you look at a picture, it's like, oh, that's just like a lot of rocks. But just being in the midst of it and knowing just like how you're surrounded by so much openness is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and I think that was just kind of the really neat piece of it is we had done a ton of hiking in the Pacific Northwest, which is very heavily forested, you know, glaciers and all that kind of stuff. So it's easy to get those really gorgeous shots. But the thing about the John Muir Trail is it's not as easy to get a beautiful picture of just an open expanse, but it is a really cool feeling being that little person in between these huge mountain passes and just experiencing feeling so small amongst all of that.
Yeah, I agree.
So that was just a little backtrack to get everybody some context on the John Muir Trail. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about what it was like to actually get to that trailhead. Mm-hmm. So when we had finally figured out all the gear we wanted for our packs, and we spent quite a bit of time building our gear. You know, it's one of those things where I always would just say, start out with what you can afford. And if you like backpacking, eventually you'll figure out a way to get something that works better for you. So we've actually, since we started backpacking, we have each purchased 2 packs.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, we could outfit about 4 people for a backpacking trip, but we've had only 1 tent this whole time and only 1 sleeping bag per person this whole time. So kind of inside of our packs, we basically had our sleeping bags, our sleeping pads, which we had upgraded. Originally, I slept on one of those egg crate looking sleeping pads, and on the final night of sleeping on our longest backpacking trip in 2021, I thought to myself, I would rather walk day and night just to get to my car and go sleep on anything else than sleep on this, like, I don't know. It basically felt like sleeping on the cold ground, but with like little egg bumps. And so that was kind of my passion that winter, was researching what sleeping pad I was going to buy, because I was like, if I'm going to sleep outside for more than like 10 days in a row, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to be on something comfortable and it's going to insulate me from the cold. So we had our sleeping pads, sleeping bags.
Which we ended up getting the Thermarest.
Yes.
Neo.
Air X Lite.
Yeah.
And we got it on sale. We're from the Midwest, so we must tell you.
Well, and so Carrie, once again, is the researcher. So she decided, like, you know, looked at so many different forums, decided, like, okay, this sleeping pad is what I want, and I'm going to get the extra wide one because I'm going to be comfortable.
Yep.
And so I thought I liked my old sleeping pad. It was like for car camping pretty much. I'd roll it up.
It was a lot heavier.
Put it on the outside of my pack. Yeah. And it worked. But then Carrie was like, well, this is what I'm going to get. And I thought, well, maybe I will get it too.
REI had a sale, and I saw that they had what I wanted and that it was on sale, but I was working night shift that week. And I have a rule for myself where I don't buy things when I'm working nights, because sometimes I buy things that are not correct or something weird happens. And so I just have a rule where if I'm going to buy something expensive or something kind of big, then I'm not going to buy it until I'm done working nights, when I'm a little bit less tired and confused.
That's just an excuse in this situation.
Well, no, I stopped.
So
okay. Moving on.
I decided to also buy the same sleeping pad as Carrie, the wide one. And then when her night shift was done,
so I so I went in and I was all happy, and I got on my computer and I was ready to buy it for 25% off, whatever it was. And I logged in and it was gone. There was not a single wide version of it. And I was pretty upset. And then I feel like Molly chose that moment to be like, how's it going today? Get that sleeping pad, because I was able to get the wide one just like you. And I was like, I don't even have a sleeping pad. So I ended up buying the regular width one, and Molly and I, through a series of discussions, determined that I should be the one to have the wide sleeping pad, as I was the original one with the idea, and also we could not fit 2 wide ones in there. However, Molly did seem to feel that this gave her license to elbow me, like, almost continuously in the tent, and an excessive amount, because there's no way you needed to move your elbow that... I've never seen you move your elbow that much at night.
It was funny because it was another one of those situations where we were pitching the tent in our yard one evening in Salem, and I think that the cops were they were like across the block, street at the neighbors, and we had pitched this tent, and we're in there, and I'm like elbowing Carrie, trying to make sure that I can get comfortable, and so then the sleeping pad was in our pack.
People ask if we fight, and we don't really fight, but that was like the closest we ever had to a big fight, and I did take a video, and we were laughing a lot, so it was okay, but it was just one of those funny times where, you know, you're trying to dial in your kit and get everything ready and find deals, and then all of a sudden you're fighting with your sister and... pitching your tent in the backyard.
Because one of you has a sleeping pad that's 23 inches wide, and the other one has a sleeping pad that's 20
close
inches
to the same
wide.
Size.
But it's a super comfy sleeping pad.
It's a good one. So we also have our pillows, which are actually both technically just sit pads.
Yeah.
And we had our tent and our camp shoes, and we had a change of clothes or water filter, all that kind of stuff. And so when it came time for us to go out to California, because we were in North Dakota at this time, we had to pack all our stuff and bring it out there, but it's a really complicated situation because we were going to start our journey. Basically, we were flying to Sacramento, and we were going to end our journey all the way down at Mount Whitney, which is way far away, and we weren't going to come back to Sacramento after we were done. We were going to fly out of Fresno, California, because Molly had a friend who super graciously picked us up from the trailhead.
Heck yeah.
And that's a story for another time. And So it was kind of one of those scenarios where I was like, if you bring a suitcase, then you have to leave your suitcase with the people who picked us up in Sacramento. Or, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure that out? And I spent a ton of time trying to figure out, what do people do? I think I actually posted in a couple groups asking, like, so how do you bring all of your supplies? Because I also didn't want to just throw my pack in the luggage area and not be sure if I'd ever see it again.
And you have to be aware of, like, what you can actually fly with on a plane. So, like, trekking poles, I would never hike without them. I love them.
Yeah.
But you can't take
bring
them in a
them on
carry-on.
a plane. Yeah.
They have to be in a checked bag. So it's like, well, how do we have a checked bag if we are never going to see the...
And so finally I looked into the dimensions and I saw that you could bring just a box. And so I had a cardboard U-Haul box because we had just moved. And so we reinforced that bad boy with a bunch of duct tape.
So much duct tape.
Yep. And then my mom has a friend who works at the airport, and I'd be like, Mom, can you text her and ask her, like, can we bring... I can't even think of what it was, but there was so much weird stuff where we'd be like, can we bring this on board the airplane, or does this have to go in the checked portion, or is this something that we have to just get in California? Because, like, you can't bring your fuel canisters for your stove on an airplane.
Like, bear spray.
Yeah, you can't bring bear spray. So it was just kind of one of those weird situations where we had to figure out all that kind of stuff, and it was just kind of hilarious showing up to the airport with a big old U-Haul box with duct tape. And
okay, and so we had our U-Haul box, and we've, like, thrown everything in it. Like, we put stuff in the bear cans and put those in there, and our trekking poles, and it weighed a decent amount. So we're like, well, we have to make sure that it actually weighs under 50 pounds.
Oh my goodness,
so we can check
I forgot
it.
about this.
So we're in our parents' house. We've packed it all up. We've reinforced it with duct tape. It's full, and we're like, well, how are we gonna weigh this box? So I step on the scale, and then I grab the box, and I'm holding it, but I can't see my weight on the scale.
Yeah, so I'm trying to peek my head around her so I can read what the number is for the weight of the box. And all of a sudden, she could barely hold the box anymore, and she steps, like, kind of falls and steps back directly onto my foot, almost on my instep, with all of the weight of her body and the box.
I crushed her foot.
And so thinking back on it right now, I'm realizing it's because you wanted to go without me, and you wanted to use the wide sleeping pad.
Yes,
it was subconscious.
Oh, so I, like, crushed Carrie's foot, and it was bruised. And we're like, oh, we're leaving on the airplane tomorrow.
Yeah.
And have I broken my sister's foot before our 200-mile walk? So we elevated it, put some ice, and Carrie toughed through it. Yeah. We don't think she fractured it, but so that's how we weighed the box, and maybe we would weigh it differently.
I'd probably weigh it the same, but I'd probably stand in front instead of behind you, I think, if I had to try it again.
Oh, man.
Okay, so now that we had watched our check box go up the little ramp into the belly of the airplane, we went to Sacramento, and I was honestly so nervous that box was not going to be there, because that box had both of our bear canisters in it. It had our trekking poles. It had all of our food, because all that we brought in the airplane was our packs, which actually I forgot to mention this. One thing that we did do, by the way, is we brought another Priority Mail cardboard box inside the box, so that when we got to Sacramento, we could wear normal civilian clothing, because we were planning to, like, go to church, and I was like, well, do they really need to see me there in my, like, hiking shorts and my weird sweatshirt that I wear? I mean, that would have been fine, but I didn't want to do that. So we washed our clothes, we washed some pajamas, and we put them in a package to mail to the friend that picked us up, so that when we got picked up, we would have some clothes to wear. We'd have, like, a toothbrush and toothpaste that hadn't just been living out in the wilderness with us and all that kind of stuff. So that was actually one of the things that I would totally 10 out of 10 do again. It was actually a really great way to do that, although it was kind of stressful to figure it out. So now we were in Sacramento, and our aunt and uncle really kindly picked us up from the airport, and they were able to take us on Labor Day weekend, Monday morning. They were able to take us to the bus stop so that a bus could take us all the way to Yosemite. Getting to Yosemite is one of those things that is so unnecessarily tricky, but you have to have, you can either take, like, the east side transport or the west side transport.
And the east side is, like, unreliable because like, they just don't run on a Monday sometimes, or, like, there's so many different
schedules. And so Molly was actually in charge of transportation to Yosemite.
Oh gosh.
I was in charge of
everything else.
Pretty much everything else. But I said, Molly, there's one thing that I just literally can't handle. You need to be in charge of transportation.
And I spent a whole day when we were in Salem figuring out the transportation. And so like I had to use YARTS, which is Yosemite Area Regional Transport System. And we got a ticket from Merced, California into Yosemite Valley. And then because we had Tuolumne Meadows as our starting point, then I had to get a separate bus ticket to take us there. But the shuttle that normally runs for YARTS was not working that year because they were like renovating the visitor center. So there was a different hiker shuttle, and it like talks all about how like the hiker shuttle, they talk about the scenery and like it takes 2 hours and you stop at all these spots. And it says that it runs from 8 to 4:30 p.m.
So we planned to take our YARTS bus to Yosemite, and it was supposed to get there at what time? Like
it was like 8:30 a.m.
8:30, and we were like, well, that shouldn't be a problem because the 8 a.m. bus will have gone, but then like the next bus will be ready to leave.
Because the shuttle that normally runs to Tuolumne every other year, except for 2022, runs on a 15-minute schedule. And I read all about that, but it was not working. But there was a hiker bus. Great.
Yeah. So, anyways, we
get to
show up
Merced.
in Yosemite.
Well,
and we get to Merced.
Yeah.
And we're sitting outside this train station at like 4 or 5 in the morning. It was
it was
early.
super early. Because I think we had the 6 a.m. bus, so we got there half an hour
So
early.
we're just kind of sitting there waiting, and like we had eaten this oatmeal that we'd made the night before, like in the car, and it's kind of like the tension's a little high for us because it's exciting, and we're kind of realizing that we're gonna hike 211 miles, and people have been saying to us like, wow, don't you think it's crazy that you're gonna hike 211 miles?
They're like, wow, how are you gonna do up on Mount Whitney? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like 2
starting
weeks
to think
away.
like, wow, we're gonna be hiking 211 miles. Like, are we gonna be okay? And then our bus just kept not coming and not coming.
It was like 6:30.
Yeah, it's like 6:30, 6:45, 7. And I was like, well, I'll just call them. Oh, can't call anybody because it's Labor Day. And I'm like, Molly, did you check and see if they run on Labor Day?
And I was like freaking out internally because I didn't even realize the mistake I had made that we were going to come
Find
up
out
to
soon.
2 hours from then. But I was like, everything shows it runs, and it just turns out sometimes YARTS is an hour and a half late.
Yeah, the bus driver, somebody asked him, like, is this even the right route? Because you're so late. And he said, hey, gotta expect delays. And I did notice that he had a particularly tasty looking breakfast burrito, but I'm sure that wasn't related to the delay. Anyway, so we finally show up in Yosemite a couple hours later than we were planning, and we're like, that's okay. So we go and we pick up our permit, and the ranger's really nice. You know, he talks to all of us. He tells us, hang loose, drop a deuce, you know, if you're gonna be going in the woods. And so we get our permit, and we're all excited. And we asked the ranger, so where do we go for the hiker bus to pick us up? And he said, oh, tomorrow morning, the hiker bus will pick you up. He said, make sure to be there by 7:30 because once it's full, it's full. And even if you have a ticket, that doesn't mean you have a spot.
And once it leaves, it's gone for the day.
Yeah, it's gone for the rest of the day. And we said, thank you, sir, and walked away. And then I said, okay, so what he's saying is the hiker bus that there was for today left at 8 a.m. and we're here and it's like 10 a.m. and we have no form of transportation.
Oh gosh.
And so, luckily there was a tiny bit of service. So we're sitting on like the steps outside the bathroom of Yosemite. I'm crying a little because I'm tired. I'm horrified. I can't believe we've spent all this time and prep just to get there, and we're not even get to go on the trail. And you know, one thing I will never forget is there are so many people who just walk past us. I'm like, is it pretty common to see a couple girls just crying in Yosemite or what? But we must have looked pretty crazy. And so Molly was like, okay, let's go talk to another ranger. Like maybe there's some other ranger who's going up to Tuolumne today and we can just like hitch a ride with them. And so we went and talked to the ranger, and he was like, well, the good news is there's a bus that leaves the valley at 6:45. And I'm like, what's the good news there? And he's like, the good news is that there's a full moon, so you can hike by the light of the full moon, because you have to start your hike on the day that you say you will, from the trailhead that you said you will. And you can't camp in the first 4 miles. So basically, if we showed up there at 7... we
wouldn't get there till like 8.
Like 8 or so.
Yeah.
At 8 or so, we would have showed up there, and then we would have had to hike at least 4 miles.
In the dark.
For our very first day. Which there's actually a ton of bear activity in the Tuolumne Meadows, and there'd been aggressive bears there recently, which we didn't know about at the time, but I'm like, that was a great plan. Anyways.
So I asked the ranger like 3 times, like, is there any other way? Because he told us, like, take the bus. And here I'm thinking, like, we only have a certain amount of food, and like we're just gonna hang out in Yosemite Valley while it's 108 degrees all day long. Like, this is horrible. And so I asked him, is there any other way? And he finally kind of relented and was like, well, Yosemite,
There's 2 of you.
Yeah, Yosemite's fairly hitchhiking friendly, so you could hitchhike. You can go down to Camp 4 and find a piece of paper, write Tuolumne Meadows, and stand there, and I guess see if anyone will take you.
And so we were like,
That's
okay,
what we're doing.
That's all we got. So we went down to Camp 4, and all we had, which, by the way, I'd like to remind you guys that we bought these bus tickets, like, twice, by the way, and they're non-refundable, so we never got to use them. So that's more money down the drain. Anyways, so we're outside of Camp 4, and all we had, because we don't carry, like, paper with us, but all we had was our little bus tickets.
That I printed off,
And so Molly's trying to write Tuolumne on them, and for context about size, I'd say they're about, like one hand span wide, maybe. So she can't even fit all of the word Tuolumne on it.
Who even knows how to spell Tuolumne before you hike the John Muir Trail?
So it's like me standing there with my tiny little bus ticket sign that says Tuolumne, and like here I am sticking out my thumb trying to look like, oh, I'm a happy girl that you should definitely pick up and put in your car. I'm not crazy and crying and sweaty because it's 100 degrees. And we stood there for quite a while. Like I'd say,
you know what? It was nice
because
we like spaced ourselves out just a little bit. So Carrie was by Camp 4 and I was like a little bit further down the road. And I had at least like 2 or 3 people stop and like say like, oh, sorry, like where is that? And none of them were going that way.
I know, like, people kept stopping for her and I was like, yes, this is the one. And then they just drive away.
And for Carrie, they'd like slow down, but I swear they probably didn't even read it because it was so tiny. They couldn't know.
So after we'd stood there for quite a while, I was starting
like
to think
an hour,
okay, we need to like think about how we're going to get water because we don't need to be like dehydrated and have a heat stroke, and all we've done so far is try to hitchhike. And all of a sudden I heard this lady be like, no one wants to take you. And it was this nice lady from Germany and her husband, and they'd been driving all across the U.S., and they said, well, actually, first of all, they said, oh, well, where are you going? And I told them where, and they said that they were going that direction. And they said, oh, but I do not think that you will fit in our car. It's very full. And I said, no, we'll fit in your car. Like, we can put our packs on top of us. But it is kind of funny because I didn't look in their car before I said that. And it was so full of stuff. Like, we barely fit in there. My feet didn't even touch the floor for the entire hour plus ride.
When we got out, finally, I had like this like red mark on my leg from where my pack.
I was like cramping.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So it was, so demoralizing because first of all, we had to wait for like 2 hours for our first bus to show up, and we thought we weren't going to get to Yosemite. We do get to Yosemite, and we realize our next bus is gone for the day, and we're like, there's no way we can get to Tuolumne Meadows. And then we have to wait for someone to pick us up, and then it's this nice couple from Germany, and they were so fun to talk to because they just thought it was so amazing to be able to interact with people from our country in this way. And they flew into Las Vegas to start their trip. They'd been in the US for like 2 weeks road tripping. And so they had to ask us, they said like, oh, is Las Vegas a typical American city? Because they weren't sure if they liked Vegas.
So it was really fun to be able to answer a lot of their questions about America and ask them questions about Germany and kind of learn about their family and all their kind of experiences. Our one regret is we did take a picture together at like the Tioga Pass lookout, but we took it on their phone and I didn't have her airdrop it to me. So they have a picture of when they picked us up, but we don't have a picture of them. So I guess we'll just have to remember them. But it was such a neat experience to have on the trail.
We were so appreciative that they picked us up, like so appreciative because it was like we were on the precipice of like, this is not going to work. This is months of planning, investing all this time, effort, money, and we're not going to do it. And then they picked us up. And then at the end, they thanked us. They said like, it was so wonderful.
It was such a special thing. And we were like, no, it was a special thing for us.
I know. So already it was like such a chaotic day and such a long day. Cause I think we got up at 3:30 in the morning to start out. And now it's like 1 p.m. But it was fun to have such a positive like experience. And we hadn't even set foot on the trail.
Yeah, and so it definitely really brought up the morale. So we finally make it to our trailhead, and we got, the nice thing about Tuolumne actually is the visitor center has real bathrooms. So I just really took it in and I savored it. I washed my hands. Oh, they were sparkling clean. And then we headed off into the wilderness.
There's this like morning that you have in your heart when you start on a backpacking trip and you use a real toilet for the last time. I don't know. It's like it's so
comfortable to sit. It's so comfortable to wash my hands. Anyways, so we started heading out for the trail. And one thing that's really funny about the John Muir Trail is the signs almost never say John Muir Trail
Honestly.
and point a direction.
Yeah.
It just says like certain lakes and this or that. And I don't know every lake on the John Muir Trail by heart. So you'd be like, is this lake on the trail or is that going to be a different trail?
And in Tuolumne Meadows, there's this whole like spider web of trails.
Yeah,
like, they're
like
everywhere.
a huge network.
So we started off on one trail, and I think we were like, I looked at all trails and I was like,
and it's
I don't think this is right. So we had to like double back a
we're
little.
like going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
I think we were on the John Muir Trail going the wrong way at first because it's not really going north or south, it's like going it's like going east west at that point. So it's just kind of funny because it took us quite a while to actually figure it out, and it was already 1 p.m. So we were like a little like, we got to get going and try to get things
I think
done.
we like busted out a good, and of course they don't have potable water at Tuolumne Meadows, so we drank all of our water when we were trying to hitchhike.
Yep.
So we had to find some water. So I think we put like a nice mile on when we finally found the trail, and then we stopped by the river, and it was the first time we had used our new Sawyer squeeze, and so we get a new water filter like every year or two, just because the flow gets so much better. And I remember that was like the time when I felt a little bit more settled and okay, because we got our water, we started using the filter, and man, it just shot out of that filter. Like it was like a tap, which if you've ever filtered water, you know how meticulous that can be. And I remember thinking like, oh, look at how fast this water's coming out. Everything's gonna be okay.
That's funny. I feel like I was just like, what's going on? Still at that point. So anyways, we were actually able to put some pretty good mileage on. How many miles did we make?
We
made it 12 miles on the first day. The super fortunate thing about Tuolumne is it's like the only flat section of the trail is from Tuolumne Meadows to Lyell Canyon. And so fortunately we were able to just kind of get rolling, and it was so funny.
Almost 12.8 miles, and we only had 1,300 feet of gain, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and what time did we end that day, do you know?
It looks like, wow.
Because the other really funny thing about the John Muir Trail is people stop so early in the day. So Molly and I, a lot of the time, the hiking trips we've been on, we'll be pounding out the miles until it's like almost sunset and then looking for a place to camp. But people on the John Muir Trail, they're there to really just enjoy the experience and take quite a bit of time. And a lot of people that we were meeting were going northbound. So they were, of course, ready to set up camp for the day. They're almost at Tuolumne. They're getting close to the end. And so we saw no
one on the trail.
Yeah, there was hardly anybody.
I think we walked for over an hour. Well, maybe we see 3 people at the beginning, and then we walked for an hour without anyone. And then we saw this one guy, and he was maybe from Oregon too, and he was doing kind of some higher camps. He was nice. We visited with him, but it was wild because I was expecting it to be like a fairly busy trail on Labor Day weekend. And there was like no one.
I know, and then we kept being like, are we on the trail? Are we on the trail?
Yeah, because
we're used to solitude. We're used to not seeing people on trails, but when I was expecting to see a ton of people and then I wasn't seeing anyone, I was like, something should be telling me that this is not right.
And then the fact that we like started on the wrong trail when we got there, we were like constantly double checking to make sure, like, are we still on the JMT?
So it was just a little bit funny.
And altitude sickness, like, people ask, like, well, were you affected by it very much? So, in the morning we had been basically at sea level in Sacramento, and now fast forward like 15 hours later, we're finally walking on the trail at like 8,000 feet of elevation. And so I would say that I started having like a pretty good pounding headache within like an hour of walking. And I just tried to tough it out and drink water. And when we finally started ascending, because you have to go up about 1,000 feet over maybe 2 miles to get to the campsite, my headache was like really pounding as my heart rate went up. And I told Carrie, I think either while we were hiking or at the end, I was like, I've got this horrible headache, but I'm sure I'll sleep it off and it'll be fine. And she's like, why don't you just take ibuprofen?
Yeah, I was like, I think that this could be something that in the modern world we can solve.
And I felt so much better afterwards and really never had issues with altitude after that.
Yep. So anyways, we had kind of a nice first day on trail, and we found a little campsite that was kind of tucked away over sort of by a river, but still far enough away that we could camp there. And honestly, I think the first night, I don't remember, didn't we actually sleep the first night?
No.
Oh, okay. So on the John Muir Trail,
Well,
we didn't sleep. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, it was funny because, like, I remember feeling so weird, like, when we made our dinner, and I was like, oh gosh, like, this is night 1 of, we thought it was gonna be, like, 17 nights, and I just, like, didn't even know how to put it in perspective, but fortunately, with all of our backpacking we've done, you just can focus on, like, okay, I guess I'll eat my dinner, and I'll do my bedtime routine, and go to bed, when you start to kind of spiral and think about, like, everything ahead of you. So, we had, oh gosh, I think... Did we have our mountain house the first night?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Oh no. Oh no.
So tasty. Chicken and
dumpling mountain house.
The best
10
ever.
out of 10, probably one of the better tasting backpacking meals.
The gas that follows.
Yeah, it affects a person. And I think that we kind of said, this may not be a meal in our future again for a long, long time. At least while we still can smell.
So Carrie and I, on previous backpacking trips, one of the ones we did in Washington, which was our longest one before the JMT, we would hike, fairly long days, but we hike fast so we can peel off, 16 miles in a pretty good amount of time. And then we literally would sleep 12 hours every night.
It was amazing.
Like, we're not early birds at all, and people are, like, so weirded out by it.
Especially on trail, they'd be like, I'm breaking camp at 5 a.m., and I'd be like, well, I get up at, like, 6:30.
And we leave at, like, 9.
And then I don't get up, actually. Yeah. Well, Molly's alarm goes off from 6:30 until 7:15. And then I kind of, like, poke my body out because it's really cold.
So I was so excited to go to bed because here, most of my experiences are I lay down and I sleep the sleep of death until I wake up. And it's so wonderful. And I didn't sleep that I could recall. Yeah. It was like the laying on one side, back, right side, rotating through until your alarm went off.
And that was pretty much weird. What happened every night that we were on trail until the end of the trip.
The only night I think I slept good was when were at VVR, which I think is like the lowest elevation we were at, like 5,000
Which we later
feet.
learned that elevation actually can affect whether or not you sleep well.
It can actually result in insomnia. And I was like, at least I don't feel like a crazy person because I love sleeping when I'm backpacking, and it was excruciating to really not sleep the entire time. But I guess,
So anyway, that was kind of a little recap of our first day on the trail and all of our wild experiences.
And then, of course, after we're down the trail another couple days, we learned that the area where we camped, like that specific campsite, they had this really aggressive bear. And I think a person that we met had maybe hiked that area the next day, and they saw a ranger with a paint gun.
Yeah.
A paintball gun, literally sitting there because the bear was not going away with anything else, and they were going to shoot it with a paintball gun, which I don't really know what that would accomplish.
I know.
You just have this weird colored bear.
Which the lucky thing about the fact that we didn't meet anyone on our first day is no one told us about the bear. So we weren't like worried about it. We were just kind of living our lives, enjoying ourselves more or less, as our late afternoon hiking selves. I mean, I think I did really just savor the fact that we actually were able to be on the trail because we had hours that day where I really thought we weren't going to get to do that whole backpack that we had planned. And so every step, honestly, it did feel like kind of just like a reward and
like
so
a miracle,
exciting
honestly.
And a miracle.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I can't believe that we actually are getting to do this because I mean, from February, no, not from February, from like April until that time, we had been thinking about and trying to figure out and plan all of these different pieces, whether or not we were going to go. And so, I mean, it was just so special to actually be walking on that trail. And luckily, we didn't meet anyone who would mar it for us by telling us about a super aggressive bear.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
Next episode, we'll plan to chat about more of the trail characters that we met and share some stories from subsequent days on the trail. So hopefully you join us for that.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.